Hey guys, welcome to the show. I'm Tejera, your host, and this is Industry Standard. Today we have the journalist Zing Tsjeng. Zing has quite the resume. She's a former editor-in-chief at Vice, a frequent contributor to British Vogue, the host of a BBC podcast called Good Bad Billionaire, and the author of the Forgotten Women series. We're going to talk about everything from brain rot to London versus New York to her Vogue article, Where Are All the Eligible Men? Stay tuned and thanks for watching. Zing, thank you so much for being on the show today. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. It's been ages since I last saw you.
It has. I think the last time I saw you was in June in Barcelona at a music festival.
Yeah, we were at Primavera and all of a sudden I just saw you. I think I was waiting for the toilets and all of a sudden I saw you walk past and I was like, am I hallucinating? No, it's Issa. And I just ran over and said hi.
Yeah, that was so fun. You were there with like 10 friends.
So many friends, a
So
big
many.
group.
Who did we see? Was it it was Chapel
It was
Roan.
Chapel Roan. Yeah, that was actually a legendary set. I loved
Yes.
that set so much.
That was amazing. Well, I'm really, really excited to chat with you today. I'm so happy you brought your dog.
I know, yeah. I think she's kind of chilling out. She's just sort of sat down lovingly staring at me because I've got treats. So hopefully she'll behave herself.
That's amazing. She'll have to answer a question or two.
Of
But
course. She's trained well.
so there's so much I want to ask you about, but the first thing is you have such an impressive resume as a journalist, and I'm wondering, tell me a little bit about your origin story. Why did you decide to become a journalist and a writer?
So I always loved writing when I was a kid. I was always that kid just locked in their room, just scribbling away on, pen and paper, and then later on the family computer, which is probably very annoying for the rest of my family. And I just always loved creative writing, but I didn't really think of journalism as an actual career until I did my student paper at university. And that was just so much fun because it just felt like fooling around with a bunch of friends. And I didn't really think that much of it then either until I applied for a competition called the Guardian Student Media Awards, which I don't think exists anymore, which is a real shame because it gave so many young student journalists the confidence to pursue this as a career. And I was one of them. So I won the Best Feature Writer of the Year and spoke to real life journalists for the very first time in my life who had actually read the articles I'd submitted, things I'd written essentially for fun. And then they said, you should think about doing this professionally. And that was, I think, when it all started. As part of the prize, I did an internship at The Guardian. And that was my first experience of an actual newsroom. I messed up so badly in my first 36 hours there. I already made a massive error and I was like, this is it, I'm done for. And I ended up kind of surviving it and sticking it out. And then, by the end of it, I thought, oh, maybe I can do this.
You were editor-in-chief of Vice. You have filled some very, very big shoes. And I'm wondering, was there a moment sort of along the way when you first realized, oh my gosh, like I am a journalist, like I am doing this professionally?
Oh, I don't know. I still feel like, and this is 15 plus years into my career, that I'm still winging it. I don't know if that feeling ever really goes away. And I think kind of maybe it's a bit of imposter syndrome, but also there is a sense of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting to do this. So recently I traveled to Atlanta, Georgia to interview Millie Bobby Brown for British Vogue. And I remember getting on the plane and I was like, I cannot believe I am on a plane ticket paid for by British Vogue. That was a real kind of head exploding moment for me. And I've had moments like that throughout my career where I just thought, I just cannot believe I'm getting away with this. And I think it's that kind of sense of joy and fun that I think I really like about being a journalist, especially when you're working with people around you who are really on your level and you're working on something together and it's great and sometimes really challenging, as you know. But I think that is that sense of camaraderie, I think, is what keeps me coming back to journalism. The sense that you're doing really good work that people enjoy, that makes a difference.
So I want to talk about your work in a second, but before we do, I'd like to talk about this article by Tolentino that really, really has stood out for me that I'd love to get your take on. It's called "My Brain Finally Broke." I'll just read a quote from it. She writes, "The phone eats time. It makes us live the way people do inside a casino, dropping a blackout curtain over the windows to block out the world, except the blackout curtain is a screen showing too much of the world too quickly." I think that quote is really interesting. And she sort of portrays this sense of like numbness and political despair. And there's so much going on right now in the news. You know, there's a conflict in Gaza, there's Trump, everything Trump. I'm curious, how do you think journalists right now sort of maintain a quote unquote like a grip on truth when we're living in such a fog of overstimulation and disinformation online?
I read that piece and I was like, wow, she's really nailed it. In my darkest, worst moments of feeling so basically distraught at the way political discourse and, you know, the media and culture is going, I find myself really going back to that essay and thinking, you know, she's got this absolutely right. It does feel like you're losing your grip on reality. I try now more and more to just be offline and to try and prioritize real life experiences and what people in real life have told me rather than what I see or read or hear online. And I think that's really important because I feel like while we're really used to talking about how political discourse has been weaponized and it's now being pushed, like the most extreme takes are being pushed because those are the things that the algorithm blesses with extreme amounts of reach and traction. I think what is less obvious to a lot of people is the fact that even really benign takes can be pushed by the algorithm in order to make you turn against each other and be polarized. So I kind of am weirdly withdrawing more to real life and what are my colleagues saying, what are my friends saying, what are my family members and loved ones worry about, because that to me is sort of more of the real deal and not so much what I hear online from a random person I've never met before, whose opinion I probably don't trust, but whom I've sort of given implicit authority to because they've gotten 5,000 retweets or something.
Do you ever feel that tension of, I hate social media, I don't want to be online, and yet my work almost like necessitates that a little bit?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I'm probably one of the last journalists of my generation to not fully be so online where every single piece of content I'm trying to put out has some sort of social media component to it. So for instance, there's that viral Vogue article, "Is having a boyfriend embarrassing?" which I'm sure we'll talk about in a sec. When I previously had articles go viral, I wanted to disappear into a hole. Like, I did not want to engage with it. And what I find really admirable about the writer of that piece, Chanté Joseph, is that she has completely engaged with what people are saying online. Like, she is fearless in that regard. And I think I'm one of the last journalists I think I'm one of the last generation of journalists who still have this kind of weird, I don't know if I should engage with stuff online. I'm a bit scared. Like, what if this is going to blow up in my face? Younger journalists that I see are just so fearless when it comes to taking people on online. And I feel like that's something I'm slowly getting over. So, you know, I'm trying to make more of my own social videos. I'm trying to like put myself out there a bit more. And I'm trying to adopt, I think, what is a very Gen Z mentality, which is at the end of the day, this is all just chip shot paper. Like, so you put out a tweet or a post that someone thinks is cringe, nobody's going to remember it in 2 weeks' time.
I think I struggle with that too, because I'm like you. I consider us to be of the same generation, and I also grew up in Spain, and I feel like everything happened so much later there, whether it's a TV trend or social media trend, and I also don't feel like it's totally natural to be online and all the time, and people have access to you 24/7, and you're sharing like very deep things. And even when I post things on Instagram, I always ask Gwen, you know, is this okay to post? Can you tell me, like, is it appropriate to the audience that I'm posting for? Do you ever question that when you're like, oh, I'm going to make this video for Instagram or I'm going to write this thing for Vogue? How personal do I make it?
Yeah, definitely. It's such a struggle, I think, because, and I know this because I was an editor as well. Personal always sells, personality always sells. People love to find out about you. They love having a personal in. They love feeling like what you're writing is relatable to their lives. And that's definitely something I'm negotiating now more, that I'm on the writing side as opposed to the editing side. How much do I talk about my own personal life versus how much do I keep to myself? And I think, that is something that I think a lot of people have to negotiate now, even people who aren't in the public eye, who are public facing journalists, even just private citizens now are putting their lives online. And in many ways, I think we're still having conversations around what is appropriate to hold back and what is appropriate to put up.
Part of me just wants to be totally
Yeah,
offline.
to live in a cave in a mountain and just never engage ever again.
Yeah. You mentioned this article, Is It Embarrassing to Have a Boyfriend? Can you tell the listeners, give us a little bit of context? What is that article about?
So this is the article I think that has just dominated online discourse. If you're a straight woman or a straight man even in your 20s and 30s and you're dating or you're single, this is the article that people are talking about. And it's this British Vogue article, which explores the idea that nowadays straight women or women who are interested in men are not posting pictures of their boyfriends online because, and this is for a variety of reasons as the writer explores. Some people think it's just straight embarrassing. Some people think it's a privacy thing. Some people don't want to rub it in the faces of people who are struggling to find a partner. So it's a really kind of more nuanced exploration than the headline suggests. But I think there was something about the dynamite combination of the headline and the fact that it was on Vogue that made it travel so far. So many people have been talking about it. My friend went on a date the other day and a guy mentioned that article. So it's really traveled far when it's hit Hinge.
That's so funny. I love that. I didn't know that was a trend, but I'd absolutely see that. I actually don't think I see a lot of my friends posting like casual boyfriends on Instagram. I don't think I see a lot of people posting on Instagram. It's all like stories now or reels or...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of, I want to talk about your article that you wrote, Where Are All the Eligible Men?
Mm-hmm.
I love that article, and I think it really hits that what we were just saying of like being personal and striking that balance between being about you but also appealing to what people are really feeling. Can you tell us a little bit about that article?
Yeah, so I've been writing for British Vogue for years. A lot of the time I do cover interviews, but I met for coffee with my editor and we were just catching up about our lives. And I mentioned I'd gone through a breakup and was single for the first time in like 13 years and was therefore dating in a completely different landscape. So before the last time I was single, I think the only dating website that existed was Match.com? No. Was it Match.com? It was something like that. No. The only dating website I had ever used prior to being in a relationship was OkCupid.com.
Wow.
Yeah, that is how long ago it was.
It's a long time ago, Zing.
And yeah, I know. And I had never downloaded a dating app before. I'd never been on it, never messaged anyone on it. So I was finding this kind of new world quite confusing and disorienting, I guess. And then I also had a lot of single female friends who were also interested in dating men. And they were just complaining about how it was impossible to meet people nowadays. And I think there probably is a follow-up article about dating women. But for the purposes of the Vogue article, I just concentrated on men. So I just kind of went out to find the answer for my single friends. Like, where are all the men? So I went to run clubs. I went to all-you-can-eat pizza parlors. I went to poetry readings to just try and figure it out and why it was so hard for single people to find each other and meet each other.
Did you find some answers after writing that article?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of different things are going on. I think people have become slightly more insular, so they aren't as outwardly friendly or approachable as you might have been in, maybe in your younger years. So that's a problem already. Like, you live in a big city, it's kind of alienating. Nobody wants to be the creep who goes up and asks for somebody's number on the street, right? And then there's also the fact that the dating apps have effectively colonized all of dating. So in a way, when people go out to a bar or to a club, they want to be with their friends. They want to go out and have fun on their own. They're not there to pick people up, because there's an app for that. So why would you want to bring that into your night out? So I think there's also that at work. And then I also think, there's quite a lot of cynicism around in the world of heterosexual dating. I think there's a lot of negativity going around. And I think for that reason, it's very easy for people of all genders to start viewing each other with suspicion. Is this person going to screenshot a message if I'm a little bit too heartfelt and embarrassing in it? Is this person going to snitch on me to all their friends? We've seen the rise of groups like Are We Dating the Same Guy on Facebook, where women can post pictures of the men that they're dating and ask for dirt from a community of other women. So I think there's a kind of mutual paranoia going on between the genders right now, which I personally find, as someone who's, writing about culture and writing about, lifestyle issues, really interesting, because I think it's a kind of very new feeling in the atmosphere right now, in the dating atmosphere.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think there's so much paranoia. I mean, even in the queer community as well, a lot of my queer friends back in New York, they're always like, I don't know if I want to even go on this date to begin with. Like, it's kind of horrible when you first find someone online. You stalk them on Instagram, you see one little thing that gives you the ick, and then you're like, I'm not going to give this person a chance.
Yeah.
What is fueling that paranoia right now? I almost feel like it's unprecedented.
I think it's the paradox of choice. So on one hand, thanks to dating apps, we sort of feel like there's an infinite amount of choice when it comes to who we can date. And then on the other hand, that is an impossible situation to put yourself in if you're single, because you have the mindset that everyone is sort of available and disposable, but obviously people are not. And, therefore you're creating the grounds for conflict where someone's not available or someone is not interested in you, and therefore you feel almost as if, hey, I signed up for this lifestyle, this like dating lifestyle in which I could get someone, on an app tomorrow, and now someone is kind of turning around and saying they're not into me. What the hell? So I think it's almost like a social contract needs to be built between people who are dating right now. What are the expectations here? What are the rules? And I think that all these trends like ghosting or breadcrumbing, red flags.
What's breadcrumbing?
So breadcrumbing, in my understanding, is when you kind of leave little hints that you're interested, but you never come out and you say the big "I like you" thing. You do cute little things, or you leave hints. But it's never really about...
Is it like love bombing, kind of?
No, because I think love bombing has a bit of a malignant overtone to it. But again, these are all kind of terms that I think have been so processed through the dating landscape that they kind of have lost all meaning.
Do you feel like women right now, are like queer women or dating queer women, are more available than men? Is it like a men thing?
No, not even. I think maybe I'm in a particularly unique position to talk about this, I guess, because I'm bisexual, so I've dated men and women. And women are just as bad at, ghosting.
Can confirm.
Yeah. I was going to say something really bad. It's like, no, cancel that. Women are capable of bad dating behavior just like men. I think the problem is that women are not associated with that behavior. So in a way, you kind of offer them a bit more compassion and forgiveness. You're like, oh, they must have something else going on in their lives. Maybe they're just going through something complicated. I'm not going to hold it against them. Whereas I think if you are a woman who's interested in dating men, there is a kind of automatic script for you now, which has been predominantly set by the media and by social media especially, that, men are trash and they've got all this other stuff going on, and you are not important enough to them, and therefore they're not worth your time. And I think certainly there are some men who are objectively quite awful to date. But at the same time, I think so much of dating and relationships is about making yourself vulnerable and also figuring out who you do and don't like and what you do and don't like. So there has to be a bit of trial and error. And unfortunately, the collateral damage kind of is other people's feelings by default, because you can't make everyone happy all the time.
I don't know, man. I don't know what you think of this, but I feel like we're living in an age where we have too many options, too many choices, and it's such a privilege to even say that, but I struggle with that, of even down to like, where do I live, and again, that is a very specific subset of people who have the option to live in different cities or date different people or try different jobs. But as someone who has experienced that, and I want to try out this and I want to try this, it's very disorienting at the same time to feel like you can't just pick one city or one person or one job. And I think that overabundance of choice is also quite new for people at least our age.
Yeah, and I think the visibility of it makes such a difference, right? Because, I mean, maybe our parents' generation, theoretically in the back of their head, they were thinking, oh, I could leave the place where I grew up and I could move to Canada, for instance. Like, people were doing that when our parents were that age. But, you know, we didn't see it as much. They didn't see it in their phones every day. They didn't see it on television. You know, it still felt like something like, oh, it's a big decision. So, you know, I'll think about it carefully. Whereas now it feels like we see this stuff on our phones, our feeds all the time that gives us the infinite illusion of choice. And I think that's the thing that is new, you know, this idea that in our phone, we've basically got a kind of dream machine that's kind of feeding us all these dreams of what could be. And therefore, what we have right in front of us doesn't really seem like enough.
Absolutely. God, I think about that all the time, and I really try to take breaks from my phone and social media in general to remind myself that, no, this is, I don't know, just to feel a little bit more grounded in my surroundings. But, you know, I moved to New York this year from London, and I still have all my friends here, and I see their posts and their stories, and they're all together, and it does create, I think it's a source of unhappiness, you know, to constantly be looking elsewhere. The grass is always greener mentality, and that's something I definitely struggle with.
Exactly. And what I find really interesting about, you know, especially when it comes to dating, is that the apps have started to move towards reducing that choice. So, you know, you have to message people within a certain number of days on some apps. You are not allowed to like an infinite number of people on some apps anymore. You know, there are some apps where you can only like, I want to say like 5 or 6 people a day. And that is in huge contrast to the way that they operated before. So I think it's interesting that apps have slowly started realizing that in order to kind of combat this kind of wave of negativity coming at them, they need to evolve and adapt.
That's so interesting. I want to hear more about that. Like, how do you feel apps right now are adapting to this sort of like crazy overstimulating? I mean, you mentioned, you know, you have to now message people, but are there other ways you feel like they're moving? Like, what is the trend right now in dating apps?
So I think what I find really interesting is there are some apps like Field, which are moving towards real life events. So Field, for instance, will have social mixers in real life. Like, they'll just book out a bar and a member can come and join and mix in real life with other members. I find stuff like that really interesting because you think it's completely anathema to the way an online app should behave. But it turns out that, you know, I mean, I haven't been to one, but my friend has and said it was great. So, you know, maybe that's what apps should be thinking about doing, creating kind of real life moments of connection. And I do think, you know, we're talking about that Tolentino essay, and the sensation that she describes, and she describes it so well, is one of where you're just lying in bed and you're just on your phone scrolling, and before you know it, 2 hours have passed and you have no idea what you've just seen or watched or consumed, and you just have this residual lingering sense of dread. And I think real life connection is such an antidote to that, which is why, you know, I think third spaces like, you know, parks, libraries, you know, places where people can come together for free are so important now, because they kind of combat that feeling of just constant doom scroll.
Absolutely. It's so crazy that we used to just meet people via, we were introduced to someone, or it was purely arranged, or you know, so a friend introduces you to a friend, and there was always one person you had in common at least. And now you can meet someone a total stranger, and you're just expected to like let them into your life. That really baffles me, you know?
That's definitely something I heard from friends who were single when I first started dating. It's like, you will be going to dates with strangers, and by strangers, we mean complete strangers, someone you would never ever meet in real life. And I thought, that is so odd, because how many situations are you in everyday life where you just meet someone that you have absolutely no connection with, whether that's socially or professionally, just like straight up raw dogging, just meeting a stranger. Like that is quite rare. And I think maybe that is part of the reason why so many people do quite badly on online dates, because there isn't an inbuilt sense of connection before.
Have you had, without naming people obviously, have you had any like very cringy moments recently?
No, I mean, okay. And maybe this is me showing either my glass half full mentality. I don't know if I would describe myself as an optimist, but maybe I am when it comes to like love. But even the bad experiences that I've had dating, the ones where, I've been ghosted or like someone just, strung me along, I felt like it was all kind of a story. Like it was just grist for the mill. Maybe this is the whole like Nora Ephron, everything is copy attitude that only journalists or writers or creative people have. But even at the absolute worst, I was always a bit like, oh, well, at least this is sort of funny.
Yes.
And maybe it's harder for people who don't have that mentality to, handle situations where they felt kind of like they've been left feeling bruised by it. I've certainly been in situations where I felt left feeling bruised, but then I always kind of go, you know what? It is just dating. Like that is just what it is. If I'd been dating for a long, long time and was completely jaded, maybe I would feel really different.
Yeah, I mean, Zing, you're a 10 and anyone would be so lucky to be in your presence. But I like that mentality. I like, everything's just a story. And I think that's a very writerly way of thinking about life that I relate to. Speaking of, I really want to talk about your relationship to London as a city. I obviously have so much love for this city. We don't normally record this show here, and it's very exciting to be here. And you're kind of a London icon. And
oh my God, really?
I want to hear, what is you've been here for so long. What's your relationship like to the city, and how does that inform your writing?
I love London. I've gotten now to the point where when I come back from a trip abroad and, sometimes you get that magic hour you're on a plane and the route it takes you is over the Thames and it's really low. I don't know how they fly it that low, but you can see everything. So you can see, I think you can see the News UK building. You can see sometimes the London Eye. You can see like the bend of the Thames. And every time I see that, I'm like, wow, this is magical. I don't have that for any other city. And I think London has been such an influence in my work because I think that was where I really understood what it meant to be British and what Britain was about. And I think when I was growing up in Singapore, you have a kind of distorted idea of what Britishness is. And it's, Paddington Bear and tea and scones and the Queen and all this kind of stuff and Mr. Bean. And then when I got to London and I started working at publications like Dazed and Confused, like Wonderland, I had this real sense of what British culture was. And it was so vibrant. It was drum and bass music. It was Notting Hill Carnival. It was, Body Movements Festival.
Yes.
It was Glastonbury. It was all these huge musical events and musical scenes and cultural and subcultures that were so vibrant and alive and multicultural that I felt like, this feels like home to me. This is the kind of place I can imagine myself being.
You mentioned all of these like scenes, Glastonbury and Body Movements. Do you feel like that you identify with like those scenes in London?
Yeah, I mean, I love festivals. I do not know for how long my body can keep camping in a field for, but I'm gonna try. Next year I'm going to 3 festivals.
Where are you going?
So I'm going to Whole Festival, which is actually in Berlin. What else? I've just gotten tickets to Mighty Hoopla Festival, which is a day festival, so maybe it doesn't count, because I want to hear Lily Allen do her album.
Of course.
Of course. I've also gotten tickets to Body Movements, one of my favorites. It's a queer music festival in London, like a one-dayer. It's amazing. And then I think I've got a 4th one. I'm not sure. But yeah, no. So I will be trampling through fields quite a lot next summer.
That's amazing. So you're obviously biased in this conversation, but I do want to ask you, London or New York, what's your hot take? Why is one better? Or are they the same but just very, very different in terms of what they can give you?
Okay, so the last time I went to New York was actually quite a long time ago. I want to say probably like 6 or 7 years ago, pre-pandemic. And I remember going to Manhattan and suddenly feeling, this is going to make me sound like a sad country mouse, feeling like this is too big. Like it's too busy, it's too big, the roads are too big, the buildings are too tall, it's too loud. I suddenly became a grandma in that instant. And then I went to Brooklyn and it was fine. No, I mean,
Yeah.
Brooklyn has its own problems, but I kind of feel like if I was in my 20s, New York would have been amazing. And I would have been so happy to live in a terrible rental that had bed bugs and rats, which my friend lived in. I actually stayed in there for a bit. And, live that life and be out every single night, going out, partying, connecting with people, going to bars, clubs, everything. And unfortunately, what I do want people to know who are in their 20s, who are listening, is that when you hit your 30s, your body, part of it is just about being like, no, I can't do this anymore. And your body is saying like, actually, I would quite like to go on a long walk in greenery. Actually, I would quite like to eat a lot of vegetables and not have to pay loads of money for them. And I think that was the moment when maybe I might have aged out of New York, or at least Manhattan.
Yeah.
Because I remember going to Manhattan when I was fresh out of university. A friend of mine had just gotten a big job at a financial publication. They'd put him up in a huge swanky apartment in sort of near Central Park. And I was like, I want to be here. I want to move here. I want to live here. And now I can't really say like I feel the same way.
Yeah, that's fair. I think a lot of people are gonna fight you on this.
Yeah, they're gonna fight me on this.
a
Yeah,
lot
they're
of
gonna
our
be
New
like,
York
you
listeners.
are a wuss. Like, just shut up and get on a flight to New York and you'll be fine.
I mean, I think what New York does have going for it is that everyone you meet is just so good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously London has that too, but something I like about New York is that I feel like any random person I meet at a party is like the best juggler in New York,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like really good at like doing makeup.
Everyone in New York is the main character of their lives. I don't know if you could necessarily say that for London. Actually, the one city that I would say has a very New York feel to it is Hong Kong in its heyday. Every single person you met was a main character. And maybe it's something to do with the fact that Hong Kongers love shouting in much the same way that New Yorkers do. But I definitely remember visiting New York when, in my younger days and thinking to myself, this feels like a New York kind of city.
Yeah, gosh, I've never been to Hong Kong, but I would love to go. I feel like I love that energy. I have to say, even though I do really miss London, you do get addicted to the New York energy and,
Yeah.
and feeling like you operate with that like intensity. And I think that you kind of learn to lean into that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm never saying never. Maybe someday a job will take me to New York and then I'll end up absolutely loving it. But I think for now, where I'm at in my current point in life, I just feel like way more of a London girl. I think there's a kind of, and London can be really hectic and frenetic, but there's also pockets of chill that I really like. There's so much greenery, which has become really important to me ever since I got a dog. There's so many parks. You can get out of the city and go on a hike within like an hour and a half. I really kind of value those things now, more so than I did when I was in my kind of 20s.
For our listeners who might not be from here, can you give us some favorite restaurants, favorite spots in London to go?
Okay, so my favorite restaurant is a Singaporean Malaysian restaurant called Norma's. Norma's has been around for years. It's an institution. It's run by a single hijabi auntie who cooks everything in this tiny kitchen and operates out of what's essentially a rundown strip mall in West London. It is so popular now, it is impossible to get a table. I think they release tables every first Wednesday of the month. But the food, and I say this as a Singaporean, so I have really high standards of food. The food is incredible. And I am really unhappy that a food publication called The Infatuation put her as the #1 spot in London, because it is just going to be impossible to get a place now. But if you can, definitely try and get a spot there. And if you can't, there's a kind of not as good, but still good restaurant called Singapura, which does good Singaporean food too.
I'm going to do some rapid fire questions. You
Yeah.
ready? Is it Glastonbury or Glastonbury?
Glastonbury.
Is it scone or scone?
Scone.
Okay. Favorite London icon?
Favorite London icon? Jodie Harsh. Do you know Jodie Harsh?
I don't know.
Jodie Harsh is, and well, it's a tie actually. Jodie Harsh or Princess Julia. They're both kind of LGBTQ nightclub icons. They've been around for years. I actually think Princess Julia was an original Blitz kid. So she was hanging out with Boy George back in the day. And they are DJs, they're party people, they're just out and about all the time, everywhere. And they're kind of like these talismanic figures. So if you see one of them on a night out, you're like, oh, it's going to be a good night.
That's amazing. Last but not least, favorite London writer?
Ooh, favorite London writer?
Or British writer?
I will say one of my favorite writers right now is Aditya Chakraborty, who is a Guardian journalist, and he writes these amazing columns about British identity and immigration politics that just have so much heart to them. I don't know what it is exactly, but you read it and you feel like he has such an compassionate, empathetic view of Britain today, and it's rooted in really kind of left-wing politics that is all about heart, but is also so incisive and politically just, he absolutely hits the nail on the head every time. And he makes the effort to do proper reporting. He gets out there and he speaks to people who don't normally have a voice in the mainstream media today. So I just love his stuff. I think he's excellent.
That's amazing. I'll have to check him out. My last question, just to end on, is how do you define success as a writer and a journalist? There's just personal success.
I would say feeling creatively fulfilled, which is an impossible target and a goal. But I think if you sort of feel like, oh, I've had a day in which I just got into the flow and time just completely slipped away and I don't even know what time of day it is. Like, that to me is an amazing feeling. That's when you know you've really kind of locked in and you've hit something really true within yourself that you really enjoy. And I think so much of modern life is doing stuff that you don't enjoy, like filing taxes or chasing invoices or doing the dishes or laundry, that when you find that one thing that makes you completely lose yourself, it's so rare. So I always think of that as, success.
I love that answer. I ask all of my guests that at the end, and this has to be one of my favorite answers. Zing, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.